Jacqueline Eberstein. I'm going to talk about personalized strategy for lifetime success. And the reason is, obviously, which most of you know, that if you're going to do this on again, off again, you're not going to get the kind of benefits we want you to get. So you really do have to take a diet, and I hate when we call it a diet, but what we mean when we say diet is that it's really going to need to turn into a lifestyle, a permanent lifestyle. Or else, and I'm sure a lot of you probably have already done it, you keep gaining and losing the same pounds again and again. And so I hope today I can give you a little bit of information that might help you change your behavior. I'm not going to talk about how to do a diet because most people are going to do that. I want to talk about changing your behavior. But I'm the director of Heal Care Protocol. I work with Dr. Wesley. A little aggressive. Okay. Let me just give you some information about me. But I think most important thing is that I've been doing some version of carbohydrate restriction since 1974. And I was just in my mid-20s, but I knew that my risks for morbid obesity were high and diabetes were high. And I was born a carbohydrate addict, and I knew I just couldn't continue to eat that way. And I've managed, 45 years later, not to be morbidly obese and not to have diabetes. So I think I've done pretty well. So, and that myth that nobody can stay on this diet for very long is frankly just a myth. But you have to have motivation to keep doing it because there's so many stumbling blocks you can run into in our food environment these days. But what I want to do first, though, to get started is to explain a little bit about HEAL. And one of the things that we do at HEAL is that we provide support for people as a part of the program. And that's what I want to talk about really in the main part of my talk, is how support is so important to get rid of your behaviors that you carry with you that perhaps keep you from getting what you want about your health and your weight. It keeps getting in the way. You keep repeating the same mistakes no matter what diet you do. But ongoing support is important. So here we do have obviously a dietary program. We have personalized guidance and support. And we also have medical supervision. If you have diabetes or you're on hypertensive meds, there is some stage with hypertension where you're going to probably need to cut your meds so that you don't get low blood pressure readings. And certainly someone with diabetes, as most of you know, as soon as you cut the carbs in your diet, you have to change the medications so that you don't get people passing out anywhere and they're not over-medicated. So, but support is a very important piece that we offer with HEAL. Part of it is everyone gets a partner to work with them through their program. If it's a medical program, you're going to get a medical person, nurse practitioner, PA. If it's non-medical, you're going to have a non-medical partner who's been trained to do low carb. But so far, all of our medical partners, non-medical partners, have been people who have done well on low carb themselves. So they've been through the process. And you've got to show that you walk your talk so that your patients can begin to do the same. So part of when we're dealing with HEAL is that we have certain rules, and you have to be in the medical program if you're on insulin or any other medications for diabetes, if you're on hypertensive medication, if your body mass index is 50 or higher, even if you don't have other known metabolic issues, if you have that much to lose, we really want you to have medical supervision to do that. And then everybody gets commitment coach appointments by certified commitment coaches. They meet regularly. It's done remotely, so you don't have to go anywhere. And it's a small group of about 5 or 6 people led by the coach. And this is where you also can get a lot more support in learning how to cope with stress. You're working with people who are going through the same process as you are. They may have found some really interesting pearls of wisdom to share with the group, or you may have things that you can share with someone else. So support is a very, very important piece to have long-term success. Okay, so understanding keto is easy, staying on it is not necessarily easy. Sometimes it is for some people who are very disciplined and are very motivated. But for most of us, you have to create that for yourself, and sometimes you need people's help in doing that. So people fail for a lot of different reasons. So when I was putting this together, I was looking at I've dealt with thousands of people over the decades, and I've dealt with myself. And what I had to learn in order to keep my plan in place, and believe me, I wasn't necessarily perfect the first few years I started doing this. I was always testing what I could get away with. And some people know the story that one of my favorites was Entenmann's Golden Fudge Cake. And when my husband wasn't at home for dinner, that became dinner. And I would go across the street. I lived in New York City at the time, so we just had a place that was open 24 hours across the street. And I would go in there, and I wouldn't even cut it. I wouldn't take it out of the box. I would just open the box with a spoon, and I would sit there and eat this cake until I really started to feel sick. So then what I would do, instead of throwing it down the garbage disposal, which is what I should have done, I would just put it away, and an hour later, when I was feeling better, I would open it again. I had to learn myself how I had to break these habits. And of course, knowing I was a carb addict, addicts can't have any of what they can't tolerate. It's like an alcoholic. You don't cut back. A smoker can't just decide I'm going to cut from a pack a day to 10 cigarettes a day, and that may work for 3 or 4 days, but it's not going to work much longer than that. So I really had to do this on my own. So I learned a lot, but I also learned a ton of stuff working with people for 30 years. I worked with Dr. Atkins. So these are just some of the main things that occurred to me that are why people will continue to fail. And so, how many people here are consumers? Are there any medical people here? Oh, good. Oh, well, thank you for coming. So if you're going to use this on your patients, these are things that you're also going to want to start to uncover. What are the top 3 or 4 things they may do with every diet they've been on that causes them eventually to fail? And that can help you to start looking at what strategies you're going to have to change, what behaviors you're going to have to change. And one of the main things, I would take dietary histories on all of our patients and find out what diets they were on. Usually they're on a holistic diet. And all they said was it just didn't work for me. And yet, oftentimes I'd ask, well, have you been on this diet? And they said no. So we often got people as a last resort. This was going to be the last diet they were going to try because they tried everything else, including diet pills and HCG and all that other stuff. But what I noticed as I started working with people is they bring their same bad habits to each diet. And then when those bad habits start to show up and they begin to fail, in their mind the diet failed. It never occurred to them. It was the way they were thinking about food, making decisions about food, giving themselves permission to cheat. All sorts of different ways they would give up their control. And one of the things we'd start to work with was starting to recognize how are you allowing yourself to get off your diet? And many of them will say, first of all, it just happens. Well, it's such an unconscious habit, it just does happen. But when someone becomes consciously aware of how they're allowing themselves to go off their diet, what are you talking to yourself about? What are you saying? You can begin to change that dialogue to help you stay on your diet rather than get off. So you need to change those old habits that sabotage you all the time. And you'll have much more success. Now, it's going to be much easier, of course, I think, on this kind of a program because we know that your hunger is going to get better, your cravings are going to get better, and who wants to spend your life trying to lose weight when you have to be fighting off hunger all the time? So one of the very important ones is to understand that the closer you follow your plan, the more control you're going to have over your eating. And it's also important for people who are carb addicts, and not everybody is, but a lot of people are, is that you have to accept the fact that you're an addict. And we all know people who may be addicted to cigarettes, addicted to alcohol. How do you get off those things? You don't just cut back. You have to not have a substance that you can't tolerate. And once people accept that, it can begin to make it easier for them to get through each day and to stay off their offending substances, which are, of course, very high-carb foods. It doesn't mean you don't ever have carbs. You can certainly have the low-glycemic or vegetables and those things that are on your diet, because they're not going to trigger your reward centers in your brain. It's the starches, it's the sugars. Those are the things that will do that. Another reason, and this is a sad one, unfortunately, which is one of the reasons why we felt that we needed support built into the program, is that people often get discouraged by their family or friends for trying another diet. Oh, don't tell me you're going to start another diet. You drive me nuts when you're on a diet. And you're always going to fail anyway, so why are you doing this? And that's got to be very demoralizing for someone who's decided they really have to confront their issues, especially if they know their health is being damaged. Which in the long run, what this is really about is your health, not your clothing size. But all I can say to someone is, would you have that same response if it was someone who was asking for your help to quitting smoking for the third or fourth time? You wouldn't say to a family member, well, you've tried that before, don't bother. I should just keep smoking. I mean, who would do that? Most people wouldn't. But it's really sad on this issue that a lot of people don't always get the support that they need. Or they don't have close friends or family. And those are people that are obviously very lonely many times. And so getting support in a program somewhere is so important. You also don't want it to be too complicated. There's enough confusing information out there about everybody with their own opinion about what keto is and how to do it, and you better do it just this way or else it's not going to work. And a lot of people get stressed about all of that. So what I recommend is whatever keto program you're going to do, make sure you get, if there's a book about that program, read the whole book. Don't read just the few pages about what to eat or not to eat, and then you don't read the rest of it, because there's a lot of useful information there that can help to give you the tools you need to succeed long term. So read everything that you can about your program so you're doing it correctly. I've had a lot of people who come in and say, well, I did Atkins before and it didn't work. So I ask them, well, how did you learn how to do it? Well, my friend was doing it and she told me how to do it. And that's not gonna work. Unrealistic expectations, this is a really huge one. Especially around the scale and the way the scale works or doesn't work, depending on what your expectations are. And I'll talk a little bit about that later, but that's a big reason why people can be on a plan. They're doing well, but they're not doing as well as they were when they were 20 years younger, and so they get mad. This doesn't work, and so they decide to quit. So you have to get your patients centered and yourselves on realistic expectations. A lot of people don't understand how your body works and how it changes over time. And that's going to be especially true for women, where I think we're certainly a bit more complicated than men are from the standpoint of hormones. And once they start to change, and this doesn't happen to everybody, but some women go through hormone changes and they're perfectly fine, and some of us aren't. So your body is going to start to change. Your biochemistry is going to change. That can affect your thyroid function. When you start getting hormone changes, it can affect symptoms. It can be very stressful if you're not sleeping, and then we know chronic stress isn't good. So what you want to do is learn how your body changes and deal with yourself the way you are now. You can't turn the clock back 20 years to when you were 30 and you lost weight easily. You've had babies in between. Men also can go through hormonal changes. As men gain more body fat, men do make estrogen, just like women do make some testosterone. But you've seen men at the beach who actually have breasts, and that's an estrogen effect from too much body fat, which can then suppress testosterone, and that can lead to a whole other bunch of issues that men are not too happy about. So, you know what I mean. Sometimes I've been told, I'll just say something that, as a nurse, I'll say, I use a lot of regular words, I'll talk about certain body parts on women or whatever, and that embarrasses people, but as a nurse, I've just been used to doing that for decades. So, anyway, I didn't want to embarrass anybody. And the other thing are side effects of medications. And every medication has side effects. And as you perhaps get sicker and you have more chronic conditions, you wind up on more medications. Many of those medications can affect your blood sugar in a negative way. Many of those medications can also affect your ability to lose weight. And your doctor usually doesn't know that. And so he may be giving you a hard time about why aren't you losing weight, but if prescribed a medication, that is making it harder. So know the side effects of your medications and have a talk with your doctor. If I need to stay on this medication, is there one that won't have that same side effect? So that you're not struggling more than you need to be. And temporarily, if you're on a medication like an antibiotic, we used to notice our patients would stop losing weight while they were on antibiotics. And a lot of times I think that was a change in the gut flora that temporarily bothered them. But, so that can frustrate you and think your diet doesn't work anymore when it's simply because you've needed to take an antibiotic. And then there are personal and social factors that can be just as much of an issue. Chronic stress is a huge issue. And stress can come from many different places. And we have short-term stresses, and then there's the long-term chronic ones that are often caused by real severe issues. But you have to learn to deal with all of them. I used to start having a chat with my patients before the holidays because it could be a disaster from Thanksgiving until January 2nd. And there would be literally patients who don't come back until the spring because they get too embarrassed because of what they did over the holidays. And so we really have to set up that they're going to continue their program. Sometimes what I would do, if someone was on vacation and they've been doing well and they're getting close to their goal, is we would take a vacation from the weight loss part of the diet, and I'd let them experiment with some of the healthier foods, the low-carb foods, but in larger amounts, maybe give them some fruit, something like that. So they can, their object of staying on that level, a higher level of the program over vacation or holidays, was to see if they can begin to learn how to maintain. And then when they come back, we just start with more of the weight loss program. So there are all sorts of strategies, because what happens to people is there are people who do this correctly, and the minute they screw up, they're off. And much of life occurs in the gray area in between. And so if you mess up once, you immediately in your next encounter with food, you have to get back on your plan. But the way most people work with, because this is what they've done time and again, oh, I messed up today, so tonight I'm going to have pizza, and I'll start tomorrow. The only thing you have control of is that moment you make the decision about food. Because if you put it off till tomorrow, there's always another tomorrow. And that's how people wind up going week after week, month after month. They're 30 pounds heavier before they decide, I think I really need to now do this again. So if you've given up your control for one meal, take it back the next meal. And do whatever you have to stay on track. Even if it means you have to go in the freezer and throw away the rest of that Haagen-Dazs ice cream. And I know that because I was there. I like the chocolate. And then there's longer-term stress. And one of the things you have to understand with stress, whether it's short-term or long-term, it is a biochemical change. It's a hormonal change in your body. And when you're going to start producing the stress hormones, depending upon how long you're stressed, those stress hormones are around all the time. They were not meant to be. Long-term physiologic stress depresses your immune system. Have you ever gone through a stressful event and you suddenly find out you're getting the cold or the flu or something like that? Or fever blisters? You know, signs that your immune system has been affected. And a lot of that is because of chronic stress. If what you're going to do is eat improperly at the same time, then eating the wrong foods are going to compound the stress you're already feeling. So when you're stressed, that's actually the time for you to be very careful on your plan. So you're not getting these big ups and downs on your blood sugar. Because when it goes down, you're going to crave and you're going to be hungry, and you may get palpitations, and your hands might shake, and you might get a headache. It can wake you up at 2 o'clock in the morning because you're hypoglycemic. There are any list of symptoms that are related to an unstable blood sugar. I'm not talking about hypoglycemia related to too much insulin. That's not what I'm talking about. This is unstable blood sugar, which is one of the steps that ultimately can lead to type 2 diabetes. And so you don't want to keep exhausting your blood sugar mechanism because it's going to make it easier for you to suddenly get into the pre-diabetic stage and then the diabetic stage. And it will not help you cope with stress, even though you think it will. So you also can eat for the wrong reasons. We should be eating for nutrition. You should be eating if you're hungry. If you're not hungry, don't eat. But a lot of people eat for recreation. They're bored. They may not know what else to do with themselves. So once you determine that and you know you're not hungry, or you sit in front of the TV and you just had dinner, but what do? You start hunting around for a snack. So those are habits that are very easy to break, but those are ones you have to really start working on because it is a pathway to failure if you continue that. Remember, if you've been off your program, you can stop fat burning for easily 4 or 5 days. And then you're still going to wind up with some hunger and cravings for a while if you aren't careful. Or you eat because it's noontime and you're used to, when you were on a carb diet, you were used to eating at noontime because you were probably hungry because of the junk you ate for breakfast. So if you're not hungry, don't eat. The nice thing is if you find you're hungry 3 hours later, then you can eat. It's not like a low-calorie diet when if you've used up your calories and you find you're hungry, then you're hungry and you don't have much of an option. And maybe you do love to eat, but would you love to have diabetes because you love to eat? I mean, those are really the kinds of mental exercises you have to put yourself through because even if you don't look at the consequences of your actions, that's still going to happen. So it'd be easier for you to make a proper decision if you say, if I do this, this is going to push me one step further to getting sicker. Maybe my mom and my dad had diabetes and I'm too heavy and I don't want that to happen to me. So any way that you can get yourself back on track is important for you to work on. And it varies from person to person because we are all different and we all have different excuses. Bad advice, and that, of course, we know how that has sabotaged much of the American population since 1980 when our nutrition guidelines came out. So most of you know here to ignore that because you've done your reading, you've done your homework. But if you ever find yourself starting to doubt that, then just make sure you start to go back and learn why low carb is beneficial and all of that, because you still have the media who will send out messages that try to discourage you from doing this. Or I know in the morning I watch CBS morning show at 7 o'clock, and sometimes they have a 90-second interview with an expert, medical expert, who's talking to you about this population-based study and tells you how it proves that eating processed meats gives cancer or whatever. And a lot of people get scared about things like that. And they also think everything that is shown in a study is proven, and you probably all know that a population-based study doesn't prove anything. It shows different associations. And not everything they say applies to everybody. If you're doing well, your numbers are good, you feel well, you're doing the program, that's what you need to pay attention to. And then there are as we already mentioned, there's family and friends that are unsupportive. There's, grandma who made your favorite cherry plum pie at Christmas time, and you're not going to have any because you know what will happen. You just need to learn how to cope with that. And one of the ways I coped with it is I will tell myself that I don't want anybody else to vote on my health. I know what's good for me or not good for me. You have friends in the office. Oh, it's somebody's birthday and there's what are they, muffins or whatever people bring now. They're going to try to talk you into eating something and you're going to pay for it for the next number of days because you're craving and you're hungry and you feel bloated. They would have have totally forgotten about what they pushed on you. They're going to go on their merry way and be perfectly happy. You're not. Don't let them vote on your health. And then there's the issue that I've seen is jealousy with friends, jealousy between husband and wife. I'll just tell you one little story. I had a couple in their early 50s. The husband, had a little pot, but otherwise his numbers were good. He was still healthy. His wife, who was a few years younger, already had heart disease. And she, of course, struggled more to lose weight, but she did everything right, and she was getting better. And the husband, of course, would try to embarrass her by saying, well, I cheated twice, but I lost 4 pounds, and you only lost 2. He was a very snarky guy. And Valentine's Day came around, and she was doing better, but she had a severe medical problem. She needed to do better. And what did he buy her but a big box of chocolates for Valentine's Day? So I had to just be quiet for a minute because I didn't want to say all the wrong things. Because it made me very angry. And so I asked him to leave the room. And then I wanted to talk to him later, and I'm going to talk to her. Now, I think a marriage like that probably has issues. Issues that I wasn't going to be able to address, other than really telling this man off, which wasn't very professional. But it was just sad to see that he was afraid that she was going to get better and look better, and this is not uncommon, and that she was going to leave him. And so that has to at least be recognized if someone keeps getting sabotaged in your marriage. And it probably could happen the other way around, although I don't remember that it ever did. But I don't know.
She had to kill.
But that's something that you, as a practitioner, would need to recognize, because this was a couple who really needed marriage counseling or deal with the underlying issues, the fear involved or whatever else it was. So, but again, it was important for her to get healthier, and somehow he didn't get it. So I'm just going to talk about a few items that might help you to be successful in the long run. And one of them is change your focus. And I like to explain this, that you need to reframe how you think about certain things. And one of them is goal setting. And if you have a short-term goal to lose weight, that's all you're going to get. When I've done interviews with people and asked them why they're coming, 99% of people would say, well, because I want to lose weight. Maybe a few people would say, and I want to learn to keep it off. So short-term goals, yes, but you have to keep that long-term goal in mind, because that's the only way you're going to really be successful in the long run and get your health back or prevent illness. So whenever you're talking to yourself about losing weight, it's also about, and I want to learn to keep it off. It's like a little mantra you can keep repeating. The story is where propaganda works, because people keep repeating the same lie all the time, and people begin to believe it. Well, you can use that same pattern here, that you want to lose weight, but you also want to learn to keep it off. The other thing I want to mention here is, when I say weight, what I want you to understand is I really mean I want you to lose fat. Although people don't really like using that word. So I'm talking about, I'll say weight, but it's really about losing fat. Because you can gain some lean mass, and the scale may weigh a little heavier temporarily, and that can be discouraging. So it isn't really so much about weight. It's about getting off the fat. And again, success, as it shows in the diagram, reframe the use of the scale. The scale is a least accurate reflection of whether your fat cells are getting smaller. So we ask people to weigh themselves just every 2 weeks, and to take your measurements every 2 weeks, because we have phone visits or in-person visits with our HEAL people every 2 weeks. Stay off the scale in between. And that could be a real reason why most people fail, especially women. The minute the scale doesn't do what they think it should do, when they think it should do that, then this diet doesn't work. And women shouldn't weigh themselves a couple days before their period. You're going to weigh heavier. And wait until it's a few days into your flow and then weigh yourself. I used to have people so addicted to their scale that I'd ask them to give it to their next door neighbor so that it isn't in the house. Because I would have people get on the scale 4 or 5 times a day, and they wouldn't drink anything, they wouldn't eat anything, and they're still upset that the scale goes up as the day goes on. Well, those are people who don't understand how your body works. It's a perfectly natural thing to have happen. And so the scale really is a big reason why people fail. And again, think of the big picture, and that's the long-term goal and the bigger picture, and how you feel other than what the scale says. And you want to start celebrating the real victories that you're having that are not related to what the scale says. Learn what works for you, and whatever you do, don't compare yourself to others. Did I miss that?
Yeah, you missed one.
Oh, this is a real aggressive button. Okay, find your own measure for success. And that can be, it's very personal. Just like we personalize the diet, you'll measure how you're being successful based on a lot of different things. And your goals may change over time, because if you have short-term goals, when you get there, then you need to come up with other short-term goals on the way to your final goal, which is to have this be a lifestyle and you maintain your life and health. So less hunger and less cravings. And you're not using diet pills. Diet pills, in the long run, are not a good idea. Yeah, they might suppress your appetite, but you become dependent on them. If for some reason those diet pills are no longer made, when they find that there's some dangerous side effects, you now have planted in your mind that the only reason why you had control of your appetite was because of the pills. And we know with carbohydrate restriction properly done, you're going to have control of your appetite and cravings. Do remember, though, women, that before your period, you can start getting some cravings temporarily. Don't have that upset you. Things will get better in a couple days. Your clothes are getting looser. And what I like to do when I ask people their goal, they would always tell me what their size goal is. And I would always ask, they would always ask them what their scale goal was, what they wanted to weigh. And I would ask, well, what's your size goal? A lot of times they really couldn't answer that because they never thought of it that way. And it's important to really have size goals. And as you start losing, you can experience success. You don't want to wait until you get to your final goal to feel like you've accomplished something. You should have goals along the way. The other thing I would like people to do is, as they're losing and their clothes got too big, is to get rid of your clothes, your fat clothes. Do not keep them in your closet. Because what you're doing is you're planting in the back of your mind that, well, I'm probably going to need these again someday. And your job is to make sure you don't need them again someday. You're going to have to do what you need to do so you don't need them. You can keep one thing that represents where you used to be, but you get rid of your others. Besides, if it got too expensive to buy new clothes, that may motivate you to get back on your plan. Your moods are better. A lot of people have anxiety. Some people even have panic attacks, irritability, anger, when their blood sugars are unstable. If your blood sugar is dropping too quickly because of what you're eating, you're going to get a stress response. And those symptoms that you experience when your blood sugar drops are related to all these hormones circulating around. And until your hormone levels stabilize, you're going to not feel too terrific. You get home and you're grumpy and whatever. And if your moods are better, if you feel more relaxed, if you're coping with other stressors better, which is something that's very common that patients would come back and say after they've been on the plan 2 to 3 months down the road, I still have the same stress in my office I did before, but somehow it doesn't bother me as much as it used to. Because so instead of their biochemical stress level being up here, because of the stresses in their life and the stress from eating wrong, they're lower. And so if you do have other stresses, you don't get quite so high. And that's a big victory. Because having chronic stress wears your body down. If you're able to be more active, if your joints are better, you have less pain, if you're breathing better going up the steps, these are all victories you should celebrate. Because what it's telling you is you have control over how you feel every day based on what you put in your mouth. And that can be motivating for you to continue. If you want to play with the grandkids, or if you want to go out riding bikes with the kids, or whatever you want to do, and you couldn't do that before. I remember a female patient I had. She was a grandmother, and she was carrying a lot of extra weight. Her joints, her feet hurt, and the kids wanted to go to some amusement park, and she never could go because she couldn't tolerate being there for very long. And she got to the point one year where she was able to go with the kids, and she could spend the whole day because she could walk now, and she didn't get so short of breath, and her legs and her back didn't hurt. She had to lose about 50 pounds, but she did it. And she realized how much more life was worth living by doing what she was doing. Fewer medications, that should be a really important goal, because a lot of meds, as we've already talked about, have side effects that you don't want. And there are other effects from medications that most doctors are even unaware of, and that almost every medication can cause a loss of nutrients in the body. And if you don't have enough magnesium, if you don't have enough chromium, if you don't have enough of whatever, then your body's not going to work as efficiently. You won't feel as well, and you're likely to start getting side effects from some of your meds because of the lack of nutrients. And the other thing is it can save you a lot of money if you can get off some of the drugs. Excuse me, I need some water. Okay. And of course, obviously, measures of success are getting your health back, and your risk factors getting better, and your blood sugar's getting better, and all those other things. But this is how you have to create motivation for yourself in order to keep going when it gets a little tough. Learn what works for you. Don't compare yourself to others. You'll have to probably start to pay some attention as to how your body is starting to get better in the short term and the long term. So just make sure you notice that perhaps for blood pressure, you may have to be on the program longer before your blood pressure starts to get better, that you can cut your meds. Doesn't mean you failed. It just means your body has to be restored longer by what you're doing. But pay attention to the fact that you're more alert now. You don't fall asleep at your desk at 2 in the afternoon. You're not running to get one of those, what are those little shots of caffeine? What do you call them? Yeah, whatever they are. In the office I worked at in New York, they had a vending machine. And I go out there to get my green tea in the middle of the afternoon. All these young guys are out there loading up on caffeine and these powders. I thought, I'm old enough to be their mother, and I have more energy than they do. But they probably had a lot of junk, in the rest of the day. So, experience your success and feeling good wherever you find it. Make your meal plans more interesting. When I was in clinical practice, we didn't have all of this stuff on the internet now with all these low-carb recipes where you can find low-carb alternatives to almost everything. And so enjoy that if it's helpful for you. If it isn't helpful for you, then just make sure you make your food a little more interesting, learn how to use seasonings, maybe use different spices or different sauces for your vegetables, use your fats appropriately. Just make it more interesting. Try different things that you haven't tried before. And there's Heal Care gives out a cookbook that Dana Carpenter wrote. How many here know Dana Carpenter? She's written many cookbooks. And many of her cookbooks will have recipes that don't have that many ingredients. I am a good cook, but I don't really like to cook. And so the less ingredients in a recipe, the better. And so it doesn't have to be complicated, but have some variety. As I've already mentioned, learn the effects of the medications you take, because getting off of your medications will be a big victory. And physical activity. This is a really important one, and it's a really important way of coping with stress. So if you're someone who's a stress eater and you need to find something else to do, physical activity is very helpful. It's not necessarily going to help you to lose weight faster, but if you are prone to getting diabetes genetically, or you have diabetes or pre-diabetes, or you're a woman who had gestational diabetes, exercise can make your cells more sensitive to your insulin. So that's one reason. But for everybody else, once we reach a certain age, around 30, you're going to start losing your lean mass if you're not moving. And by the time you're 20 years later, you can lose enough lean mass that your metabolic rate is lower because you don't have enough of the calorie-burning tissue, your muscles. So it's also going to help you to keep your balance better as you age, less likely to fall. You're going to be stronger. So just go out there and start with something, even if it's walking. And a lot of people would like to exercise, but they're carrying too much weight. So as they lose weight and their joints start feeling better, a lot of people just will start to move more. They'll start to walk more. And then you have the couch potatoes who can't think of anything they'd like to do. So I would ask my patients that by the time they come back next time, come back to me with an idea of an exercise that you hate the least. And then we'll talk about how we try to incorporate that in your life. One of the things that I found that is a mini trampoline. Have you ever seen the little mini trampolines? I mean, heck, you could do that while you're watching the baseball game or the football game or the evening news or Game of Thrones or whatever you watch. So, and you know, a half hour can go very quickly. And it's good for your bones, helps to keep calcium in your bones. So you can learn to, you won't necessarily learn to like it, but you can learn to hate it less. I was a runner for 15 years. I ran 2 marathons. And I once read in a running book, and this was true for me, every single day I ran for 15 years. The hardest steps were the ones from the living room to the front door. And while I was getting there, I had to talk myself into doing it. It wasn't until I started to run that I finally got over that. But that was something I had to do always. How did I do this again? Now, Richard, I really messed up here.
There you go.
Keep it simple. If it's simple, it's less stressful. Weigh and measure only every 2 weeks. Use real food. And at the beginning, you don't have to ever use keto foods. Go out and buy anything special. But some people like some variety later, so they want to try some keto recipes, so they want the almond flour for the crust or whatever. Not at the beginning. We really want people to do a 20-gram total so that you can begin to not only physically but emotionally separate yourself from sweet foods, sweet taste. Because once you can do that, it's going to be easier for you. And I'm sure somebody's out there saying, well, but that would never happen to me. Yes, it will. You just have to trust it will if you do it long enough. I haven't touched or looked at Entenmann's Golden Fudge Cake in probably 40 years, so it does work. Now, you don't have to do food diaries, you don't have to measure ketones, you don't have to do glucose unless you have diabetes, and you do, because we're going to have to know what your blood sugars are every day. If you have hypertension, you're going to have to check your blood pressure. But you don't have to do any of that, because if you just follow instructions from most people, it will work. There are times when we have to troubleshoot certain things with people that we may need to look at a food diary or something like that, but don't make it more complicated. Now, there are some people who love to collect, I think engineers like to do that. Dave Feldman agree with that. And if you'd like to do it, fine. But it's important that you understand that your weight can fluctuate, your ketones can fluctuate. Women can lose their ketones right before their period. Don't panic, they'll come back, unless you've cheated. So just don't make it harder on yourself. Don't make it more stressful. You don't have to count calories. Eat until you're satisfied but not stuffed. And that's a really big one. Because we know if you eat enough protein and you have fat, after a week or so, you're just not going to have as much food as you were used to. So don't eat the 3 pork chops because that's what you used to eat. Start experimenting with finding out how much do you really need. Because calories matter, but not in the way that we've been taught they matter. And it is possible to overdo too much fat, to get your calorie intake too high. Yes, you might get your ketones higher, but you're not losing weight. And we've had people, particularly women at HEDO, where we had to stop the pushing all this excess fat, bulletproof coffee and all of that. Because they weren't accessing their own fat stores, they were just utilizing the dietary fat. And that doesn't get you very far. So I probably went way over. but I have some time for questions, I think. Yes.
Coming from Montreal, Quebec, I was wondering where can I get someone like you to come up with me?
Well, you can, I mean, well, I mean, Dr. Westman lets me have a 2-week vacation. But I don't think I could go there because of that poutine. It's all over the place. And I still struggle with French fries. Although if they really look good, I can have 1 or 2 and then that's it. I do know that I'm not going to wind up eating all of it. But, I honestly don't know.
I had just a joke, but more seriously, around this whole food addiction. I work with doctors with ketogenics and whatnot. I do always feel that there lacks some psychological piece to the programs. And because I'm a kinesiologist and doctors, again, just like nutrition, don't have necessarily the tools or the background in how to deal with that psychological aspect.
No, they don't, nor do they have the time.
That is a real big piece that I always question myself, and I don't have the tools either, right? And I'm supposed to only talk about exercise. So, any thoughts,
Well, when I saw patients at the Atkins Center, we spent a half hour with our patients, and I would spend 6 or 7 minutes talking about the diet, and the rest of it was about this stuff. There are books that you can read about how to change behavior, how to help people begin to become aware of their unconscious decision making, because a lot of this is unconscious, because they've repeated the same pattern so many times, it just happens. I'd ask someone about, well, why did you cheat? They say, I don't know, I just found myself eating the cookies. And yet there were a couple steps before that they aren't consciously aware of. They actually would talk themselves into being able to do it this time. But I would send people sometimes home with homework as they started to become aware of some of this, to start to write down, well, what do you think you were thinking before you did that? And usually what they think they were thinking was what they were thinking. They were giving themselves permission this one time to do it. And yet it often isn't the one time. It can carry on for a week or 2. So a lot of what I learned, I had to learn on my own. And a part of it I learned from myself because I had to change my own behaviors. That's really the best I can answer for you.
Thank you.
There's a lot of misinformation or confusion, I guess, when it comes to looking at your total carb count or net carb count. Do you have an information?
Total.
Total, okay.
There are some people, if you get a 30-year-old guy who's, got 30 pounds to lose, and he's otherwise healthy and active, net carbs probably would work just as well for them. But that's not the kind of people we usually see. And so we start at 20. And certainly if they've got metabolic disease, you have to start at 20 total. And you can always, as people get better, you can always start to expand their diet a little bit. I mean, we like to keep people ketogenic anyway because we feel there's a lot of benefit to ketosis. And there may come a time where you can do more, but then there may come a time as you get older, your hormones are different, whatever, you're now on 20 grams again, and that's your maintenance diet. For me, 20 grams is now my lifetime maintenance diet, because if I do much else, I already start to gain. Yes?
So I'm thinking ahead for the holidays, which are not very far off, and how to help keto patients think about how to handle holidays differently than they ever have before. And one way will be substitutes for sugar in recipes, but it doesn't seem like that great of an idea because it'll rearrange the statute. And so I'm thinking, I wonder if you have advice on how to do that, like fancier meat dishes or...
Yeah, just make things more exciting. Make some protein foods that maybe you don't normally make. I always make sure I have the cauliflower mash, because with most, Thanksgiving or whatever, there's always mashed potatoes or something like that. There's also, there is a low-carb stuffing recipe where you use pork rinds, so you can find that. I make a low-carb pumpkin pie. You can also make a low-carb cheesecake. So have those alternatives over the holidays. And then once the holidays are over, then you don't do that anymore and get back to just doing the whole foods, because chances are they're probably going to have more weight to lose or whatever. The other thing is I used to have my patients always make appointments. And if they didn't show, I'd call them up, because I wanted them to know that I had expected to see them during the holidays. And I would start booking people on January 2nd to make sure they were going to come back. And also that conversation of, if you really screw it up, your next encounter with food, you have to be back on track. Because then you're going to minimize the damages. And the other thing for some people, again, if they were relatively healthy and close to their goal, we would expand certain things that they could have. And their goal is to maintain. So, and then they go back on their program. And they at least had an experience of learning they could maintain. And so you have to try all of those little tricks based on what your patient's issues are.
So would it be a reasonable option to discuss with them and help them choose what they want to do? To say, over the holidays, okay, I'm not even make a goal to necessarily stay in ketosis, but just to maintain weight. Is that even going to be a possibility?
It is possible, unless you've got a real addict, that the minute they start having something, they're going to be. Now, if they're just starting and they have a lot of weight to lose, and maybe they have diabetes, you really need to try to support them to really be as careful as they can be. Yeah. The other thing is that I would talk to people about, you're going to have this, this, and this, and there's two things there that you would like to have but aren't legal. So you pick one. You don't do both. And you don't do all of it. You pick the one thing you're going to do, and otherwise you stay 100% on what you're supposed to do. And just make sure you book them to come back to see you, and tell them, if don't be embarrassed. Or people would say to me, I didn't come back because I didn't want to disappoint you. So whatever you can use to get them to minimize the damages. Yes?
What are your favorite real food snacks if you're stuck at work for 10 hours or 12 hours and you can't have sardines and you're sick of nuts? What do you do?
Well, I bring pepperoni. I'll bring some cheese. I might bring some deviled eggs. Something that's maybe a little fatty. Pork rinds. Pork rinds and maybe some guacamole. When I go to a Mexican restaurant, I take pork rinds so that I'm not tempted with the other stuff. So there's a lot of little things that, and a lot of the cookbooks, you could do ham and cheese roll-ups. There's any number of different things. Make some, chicken salad or something. Because at least you get your protein and fat, and then you're likely to stay in control.
Okay, this is for me.
Okay.
I don't particularly have a weight issue, but I like to stay in a keto, nutritional ketosis.
Right.
So instead of 20 grams of carb a day, how much can I go up? Do I have to check with my ketone measures and meters and see where I am at?
Well, there's a couple things you can do. You can slowly start. Most people think most of us are going to stay ketogenic up to about 50 grams. Some people might 50 grams. So you want to stay below 50. But what you want to do is start increasing slowly. I would start increasing the vegetables that you now have. If you'd like to have more of the cooked vegetables, do that. If you'd like a bigger salad, do that. Slowly increase. But always be on the lookout for any increased hunger or cravings. That's the tip-off you've gone too far. okay? And so that might help you to figure out what to do. Yes.
Well, one comment, several people have mentioned it, and I know I brought this up during the forum yesterday, and Doug's really willing to look at it. But I think nurses are an untapped resource. I'm a clinical social worker and a nurse. I do a lot of substance abuse work, so for the addiction piece that,
Yeah.
that I'm hearing that he's going to look at, let's do some more of those tracks next year, so I was really glad that you were here. Thank you again, Jackie.
Oh, you're
My
welcome.
question is for women who are older. This actually, my sister is 65, who couldn't get this one. What do you know, or what's the research showing about osteoporosis and the keto diet? Is it effective in treating that? Can you have DHEA? Does that help?
Well, first of all, one of the myths that I started hearing in 1974 was that this diet is going to give you osteoporosis. And that started solely because of, in the early 1970s, there was a protein-sparing modified fast with a very unhealthy source of protein. And in fact, some people died. That was finally had to be stopped. But what was done is, at the beginning of starting this program, they measured calcium excretion. And calcium excretion was higher. So the theory was, well, if it's higher now, it's going to be higher forever, and you're going to eventually get osteoporosis. And when they repeated it with meat, that didn't happen. And do remember, your bones are, you need protein for healthy bones too. And part of the problem, especially with older women, is they just don't get enough protein. And you asked, well, you need, for your bones, you need certain calcium, you need calcium, but not necessarily huge amounts. You need magnesium, boron is a mineral. That's important when it comes to maintaining, building bone. K2 is important so that it stays in your bone and doesn't wind up somewhere else. And weight-bearing exercise, because that's how your body stays stronger, because you're actually appropriately stressing it. And when you appropriately stress your muscles and your bones, your body is going to make them stronger. So that's what you do. But again, the other thing to remember is a lot of whether you're going to develop osteoporosis is dependent on how healthy your bones were when you were a teenage girl, actually. And sodas with the fizziness and all that is just not good for, no. There was a study, wasn't there, Eric? After 2 years, they measured bone density, and there was no loss of bone density. I promise this one. Yeah. And then I'll take you, and then they're going to throw us out of here soon.
Okay, so my question to you is, and I can't speak for other women, I can only speak for myself. I've had a full hysterectomy. I have no ovaries. And I'm wondering, how is the keto related to someone who has had a hysterectomy, who cannot be on hormone supplements, who cannot be on any type of synthetic hormone? Does it work? Is there a special, more formula tailored?
Well, my answer to you would be the same as a woman who's gone through menopause.
Okay.
And some of us lose all of our hormones. Others don't. Now, your adrenal glands are supposed to produce some hormone once your ovaries shut down. That happens in some people, but doesn't happen in others. Another reason why not to be chronically stressed is by the time you get to menopause, your adrenals are a little lazy. My suggestion to you is you just do 20 grams and you forget any preconceived notions of how fast it should happen.
Okay.
Because you need to keep yourself as healthy as possible, and getting your weight off is part of that, so it doesn't stress your cardiovascular system. So that's what I would suggest.
Time for one more.
Yeah, I promise this lady here.
Last one.
Yeah.
You're on.
I always associate getting enough calcium with dairy, and yet there's a lot of carnivores that have spoken of this.
And they don't like dairy. But if you tolerate dairy, I would say have it. I do have dairy too. But
where would they be getting their calcium if they're true carnivore and only eating meats? Is calcium in like?
You're gonna a lot of good source of calcium are sardines with the bones, and you crush up. the bones in the sardines. I wouldn't do that because I can't stand all the fish. I'd rather exercise. You're also going to get calcium from some green leafy vegetables and things like that. The other thing is, if you're really worried about it, then that's when you may use a supplement. But the other thing is, if you're bigger bone, that may not be as big an issue. Because if you're smaller bone, you have less bone density, so if you start losing, you can't afford to lose as much. But it's your health up until the time you start to go through menopause, and you want to maintain as much bone mass. But supplementation then is something to do. I mean, to me, supplementation is an insurance policy. Well, vitamin D, yeah. Well, thank you very much.